Now to talk furthermore about this, we are joined by Ayub Sumbal, a geopolitical analyst from Beijing, to discuss Washington's economic pressure on Iran and tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, and also China's push for a diplomatic resolution. Welcome to Pakistan TV's transmission. How do you see this situation? Because trying to apply economic pressure amid all the escalation that we were seeing in the past few weeks, how is this taking both the parties?
Thank you very much for having me. And I think that the U.S. sanctions, particularly towards Iran, I think it's never work. And because Iran economy and the Iran, I mean that the way of their economic governance is totally different, and it will not have any impact on Iran economy. It's quite resilient economy, and it has been surviving for the last several decades despite severe sanctions. But one thing that is very clear, and it should be discussed, that it's the growing frustration from the Washington that ultimately, when they will not put any other pressure, diplomatic pressure, the defense pressure on Iran, finally the U.S. is moving towards this kind of the economic sanctions that they called it the most severe sanctions on Iran. And one thing to be noted is this, that the Donald Trump also facing I mean, its sharp decline of its popularity because just 2, 3 days before there was the survey in which US President Donald Trump ranking further fall down. So I think that this is all something like this that have more collateral damage inside the United States, especially because the Iran war has divided the American public. I think quite highly. It's never been seen that the American public has been divided, especially the public opinion at this level, because the Iran war and especially the American taxpayers who kept in the dark by saying on the Iran war has put a big gamble for Donald Trump and his midterm election. So I think that Donald Trump is still trying to reduce this damage to his midterm by putting such kind of sanctions to give some sort of leverage towards the American voters.
Now, we're seeing that statements coming from the Iranian side, they're showing that, I mean, they're talking about the statements which were made from the US side before war. And it is more inclined towards the objectives that were supposed to be achieved through this war. The whole shift is shifting towards the Strait of Hormuz now. We're seeing that the center of attention now, that is the Strait of Hormuz, and opening up Strait of Hormuz, that is a key point which is being discussed for now. How do you see this? Because this is, again, putting both the sides and even the whole region into some economic warfare, and this escalation regarding the Strait of Hormuz, if it stays choked for a long period of time, this is going to affect everyone eventually. What's your take on this?
Yes, I think that the central conflict, or you can say that the basic confrontation is the Strait of the Hormuz. That I mean that the all parties want to be open, but of course the commitments that the United States make in front of the Irans while lifting the sanctions, and then they ask, I mean, for those frozen assets of the Iran. I think that the Washington is not moving towards that side, and these were actually the part of the agreement. That's why Iranians are very, I mean, strict, especially their new leadership. And they are quite clear on their stance towards these commitments. So until unless there is not any major breakthrough towards that commitment, there is no possibility of this, that the Iran let down or will have relax this kind of thing. And Iranians also know very clearly that that the power they have, and especially they have foot on the I mean that the oxygen pipe of Washington, that is the Strait of the Hormuz, and they know it very clearly. So that's why I think that the Iranian have leverage on the Strait of the Hormuz, not only on the United States, but especially all stakeholders who have been passing through from the Strait of the Hormuz. So if there could be any consent or consent developed between the Washington and Tehran on the Strait of the Hormuz, there could be things moving forward. But we saw again that Donald Trump comes up with other lame excuses. He again talking about the nuclear deal, that they will not allow Iran. But nuclear deal is not something like this on the table, and it's not mean that as major issue that's like the Strait of the Hormuz. And now again, he put the severe sanctions on the Iran. So I think that, of course, such acts would undermine the commitments that done by the Washington, and it could further, complicate the situation and the whole region.
Do you see both the warring sides sitting on the negotiating table once again anytime soon?
Of course, there is always a room for the talks and the negotiations, and because I think that the pretty much the things will go towards the dialogue and the table, because I think that there are both sides, especially in terms of the defense. I think the both side have tested, and that Washington also knows its defense capacities and capabilities with its strategical and the regional alliance, and then I think that Iran's have also. That it could not be underestimated in terms of the defense. That earlier the U.S. Intelligence reports make a wrong prediction about the Iran. That the massive defense capabilities. So I think that of course things could return back towards the dialogue, maybe near towards the U.S. midterms.
We have seen that Donald Trump went to China. He met Xi Jinping as well. And this was something which was highly looked into by the international media as well. Now we are seeing that China is not in the favor of putting economic sanctions or furthermore economic sanctions on Iran. How do you see this?
Of course, China will never support the economic sanctions, and especially this kind of the harassment to any country in the world, and especially towards Iran that have a very strong strategical and economic partnership with Iran. So China, of course, undermine, and of course, China reject this kind of the attitude and bullying toward any country and Iran. So I think that the meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, I think that was also quite meaningful. And I think that in coming days, if there could be the more meetings between the both the leaders, I think that of course Iran would be one of the major issue that could come into the discussion of both the leaders. But I think that China's stance is very clear that it would not allow the breaching of the international law. It would not allow that the violation of the United Nations Charter, and especially this kind of the aggression that has been shown by Israel and the United States toward Iran by challenging and sabotaging its sovereignty.
When we talk about the Strait of Hormuz, this is a very important point. This has been discussed in so many talk shows. This has been the point of talk whenever there is a high-level meeting during different delegations. We have seen President Donald Trump discussing this over and over again. Now, when we talk about Strait of Hormuz being choked at this point, we talk about a mechanism under consideration just to open the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think that there is some international law which can actually support in opening the Strait of Hormuz, because this is a very important shipping route?
Yes, of course, there is an international law of sea, and I think that that is quite much comply with the United Nations, and it's called UNICLOC. I think that is one of the most important law. But here, the problem is this, that when US set an example and a precedent to violate the international law, because they first violated the international law, and then if Iran goes towards that level and trying to defend its sovereignty and link its security with to some the breaching of the international law, then I think that any country could go to that toward that level. And I think that is actually the problem, because when US set a precedent and being a country that is, that holds even the United Nations in his country. So I think that when it's sets, it's a quite bad example that that they set. And right now, when there is Strait of Hormuz is choked, I think there are also many gray areas inside the Strait of Hormuz, that who is passing and who has been choked. So I think that that is something like this that make the situation very dangerous and messy, because such kind of the conflicts are definitely provoked, and it could be aggravated at any time. And of course, the collateral damage and then the engagement of the other countries that is more likely in such kind of the situation. But of course, there is an international law, and according to the international law, the Strait of the Hormuz should be open. But when some international event happened, and in the follow-ups of that event, then must be it could be considered that why Strait of the Hormuz is choked? What was the reason that take this situation towards this stage that Iran blocked this Strait of the Hormuz?
Geopolitical analyst Ayub Sumbal was with us. Thank you so much for giving your time to Pakistan TV.